The night was cold and silent, too silent for London. Outside the thick sandbagged windows of number 10 Downing Street, the city lay shrouded in blackout. Only the faint hum of aircraft in the distance broke the stillness. German bombers again crossing the Channel. Inside, the air was thick with smoke, cigars, sweat, and the tension of a government facing annihilation. It was June 1940. France had fallen. Hitler's armies now stood triumphant across Europe. And for the first time in modern history, Britain stood utterly alone. For nearly a year, the storm had been gathering. The war that began with the German invasion of Poland in September 1939 had at first seemed distant. A phony war, as newspapers mockingly called it. There were speeches, alerts, rationing drills, but no real battles on British soil. People went about their daily lives, shopkeepers dusting their shelves, children playing in the streets, farmers tilling the land, as if Europe were not already burning. But by the spring of 1940, the illusion shattered. In April, Denmark and Norway fell in lightning succession. In May, the Wehrmacht swept into Belgium and the Netherlands. By June, the German army had broken through France like a flood, and British soldiers, 338,000 of them, barely escaped at Dunkirk, ferried home across the Channel by a desperate flotilla of warships, fishing boats, and private yachts. It was one of history's great rescues, but also a retreat. Behind them, they left tanks, guns, and allies to be swallowed by the advancing enemy. Churchill, only weeks into his premiership, stood before Parliament on June 4th and delivered a speech that would echo through time. "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." The words electrified a nation, but behind closed doors, many were not so sure. Britain in 1940 was not the Britain of empire in her prime. Her army was battered. Her air force, though brave, was outnumbered nearly 4-1 by the Luftwaffe. The Royal Navy remained powerful, that even its strength couldn't stop a German invasion if air superiority was lost. In Whitehall, the corridors buzzed with anxious whispers. The Foreign Secretary, Lord Halifax, calm, aristocratic, cautious, quietly advocated for a negotiated peace with Hitler, perhaps through Mussolini's mediation. He believed it was pragmatic. Survival, he argued, required compromise. Prime Minister Winston Churchill disagreed violently. Churchill had been appointed only in May after Neville Chamberlain's resignation. To many, he was a political gamble. Brilliant, yes, but volatile. Yet in the chaos of defeat, it was precisely his volatility, his defiance, that gave him strength. According to diaries from the War Cabinet, the debate over surrender came to a head between May 24th and May 28th, 1940. France was collapsing. The British Expeditionary Force was trapped. The Navy warned of imminent losses. Halifax pressed for peace feelers. Churchill listened, pacing the room, cigar smoke curling around his face. He said little at first. Then, with a growl that froze the table, he spoke. "If you Long Island story of ours is to end at last, let it end only when each one of us lies choking in his own blood upon the ground." It was not rhetoric for show. Those who knew him, even his rivals, recalled his absolute sincerity. Britain, Churchill believed, must never bow, because if Britain surrendered, freedom itself, not just for the island, but for the world, would die. Across the Channel, Adolf Hitler stood at the height of his power. From the North Cape of Norway to the Pyrenees, the swastika now flew over conquered lands. France had signed the armistice on June 22, 1940, in the very same railway carriage where Germany had surrendered in 1918. The gesture was deliberate. Revenge for the humiliation of World War I. But Hitler had not yet planned to invade Britain, at least not immediately. According to German war diaries and declassified OKW records, Hitler still believed the British might make peace, perhaps even join him in a divided world. "I have always admired the English," he told his generals. "Their empire is vast, and I do not wish to destroy it." For Churchill, this made the moment even more perilous. If Britain showed weakness, Hitler might offer terms, and some in government might accept them. Meanwhile, German U-boats began choking Britain's lifelines, sinking merchant ships across the Atlantic. Invasion barges gathered, quietly, along the French coast. The Luftwaffe began reconnaissance over southern England, measuring, mapping, waiting, and every night the sirens began to wail. London, June 1940. The blackout was total. Curtains sealed, streetlights dimmed. The only illumination came from cigarette tips glowing in dark corners, and the occasional flash of anti-aircraft fire in the distance. In underground stations, families slept on cold concrete floors. Children clutched their gas masks, as if they were lifelines. The sound of engines above meant one thing: another raid. But even amid the fear, something strange was happening. People began to believe. Churchill's speeches, broadcast over the BBC, became the heartbeat of the nation. His voice, gravelly, defiant, unmistakable, reached into homes, factories, and shelters, transforming fear into resolve. Upon this battle depends the survival of Christian civilization. Upon it depends our own British life, and the long continuity of our institutions and our empire. He never promised victory. He promised struggle. And that honesty struck deeper than any comfort ever could. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the British intelligence network was mobilizing. MI5 rooted out German spies. MI6 gathered whispers from occupied Europe. And at a quiet estate in Buckinghamshire, Bletchley Park, mathematicians and linguists began the impossible task of cracking the German Enigma code. Every night, Churchill would call for updates. Have we code opened them yet? The answer, for now, was no. May 28th, 1940. Perhaps the most critical night of Winston Churchill's life. The War Cabinet met inside the Cabinet Room at number 10. Halifax once again urged negotiation through Italy. Chamberlain, though loyal, seemed inclined to agree. Churchill was isolated, 3 against 1. The fate of the British Empire balanced on a few men and a single night. According to minutes recorded by Sir Edward Bridges, the tension was unbearable. The Prime Minister smoked endlessly, pacing between the wall-sized maps and the long polished table. Every footstep echoed the weight of the moment. Finally, He requested a full meeting with the broader cabinet the following day. There, surrounded by 30 of his ministers, not just the inner circle, Churchill made his case. He did not read from notes. He spoke from the gut. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be free. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age. The room erupted in applause. Not polite applause, but thunderous, raw, overwhelming approval. The ministers, many of them veterans of the Great War, rose to their feet. They had heard enough. There would be no negotiation, no surrender. The War Cabinet reversed course that same night. Halifax, though unconvinced, stood down. Britain's fate was sealed, to fight on, whatever the cost. That evening, Churchill returned to his underground war room, the map-filled bunker beneath the Treasury building. And there, he made a decision that would define not just his leadership, but the very spirit of Britain itself. He ordered preparations for invasion defense. Beaches mined, barricades erected. The Home Guard, ordinary men armed with shotguns and sometimes broomsticks, formed into local militias. He knew they couldn't stop an invasion outright, but they could turn every field, every hedgerow, every village into a battlefield. In his private notes from that night, he wrote, "I am convinced that every man will do his duty. Let it end, if it must, upon the beaches and in the ruins." At 1 a.m., he walked alone into the garden behind Number 10. The distant rumble of anti-aircraft guns echoed across the city, like thunder rolling over a sleepless nation. He looked up at the sky, faint streaks of searchlights cutting through the darkness, and whispered a line he had used before. "We are all worms, but I do believe that I am a glowworm." Over the coming months, Britain would be tested beyond imagination. The Luftwaffe launched its full assault. The Battle of Britain. German bombers swarmed over London, Coventry, Liverpool, Bristol. Entire streets vanished in fire. Thousands of civilians were killed. Fires roared across city blocks like burning oceans in the night. Yet, the RAF held. Young pilots, barely 20 years old, climbed into their Hurricanes and Spitfires, fighting dogfights that lit the skies over southern England. Engines screaming, tracer rounds carving bright lines through the clouds, as Britain's fate hung in their wings. In August 1940, Churchill stood before Parliament and spoke the words that would define a generation. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. By then, Hitler had already postponed his invasion plans indefinitely. Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain, would never take place. And so, Britain had not only held the line, it became the line, the last fortress of freedom in Europe. That night, when Churchill refused to surrender, Britain stood alone, but not afraid. From the ashes of defeat rose defiance. And in that defiance was born the hope that would one day free the world. But the fight was far from over. The Blitz was coming. And before dawn broke over London again, the capital would face the longest, darkest nights in its history.